Hey folks, this is Best in Slot and welcome to day 1 of 5 of our discussion, review, a little bit of analysis of Prehistoric Planet, the brand new dino documentary just landed on Apple TV+. You can sign up for a free 7-day trial to Apple TV and therefore watch the entirety of season 1 without paying a penny. So I recommend everyone do that. Of course, you'll be able to see it without my face in the corner, which is a big benefit to everyone, I'm sure. If you do want some screenshots without said face, they're all over Twitter. People are posting everything. I kind of want to push people to go watch the show, so I'm not going to show you absolutely everything, but we are going to discuss everything that happens, so it is worth mentioning this is a spoiler-filled review. If you want to go into the show completely clean, then I don't know why you'd watch this, but don't. Basically, come back later when you've already watched it, okay? Okay. And we open up with our beloved Hank, who has become much of a meme himself throughout the hype for this show. And we're in North America, we're in this sort of inland ocean sort of area, and Hank is now swimming with his baby, so you'll see in a second, to a island nearby, searching for food. And what's really interesting is, okay, so the swimming Rex is probably the most surprising behaviour in this episode. Let's put it that way, the most surprising behaviour. T-Rex is a gigantic, chonky animal, especially Hank. Hank is especially chonky, and to see him swimming is quite surprising, and he's a very good swimmer, so it's not just like a flippy floppy bleh. He's a good swimmer. Now the show does explain this in the episode. It mentions how Hank has hollow bones, like particularly in the rear area, and he also has like powerful hind legs, which obviously help you kick and help you move forward as a swimmer. But actually, really interestingly for Prehistoric Planet, and definitely go check this out, on the page for the show at the bottom, there's like a bonus featurette. It's about 5 minutes long, and it goes into the science behind a particular behaviour from the episode. So for episode 1, it's all about the T-Rex swimming, and they have various things mentioned about how that happens. So it does mention the hollow bones, and it mentions the powerful hind legs, but it also mentions how we've got these claw marks, these scratch marks at the bottom of riverbeds and of oceans and stuff like that, where theropods have kind of like swam along and kind of scratched at the bottom of the ocean, if you know what I mean, like that. So we've got that as evidence, and he also mentioned that the most similar creature we have to the Rex in modern day life is creatures like ostriches and emus and stuff, those large flightless birds, and how they're actually pretty exceptional swimmers. So they take what's probably the most, to the layman especially, the most controversial behaviour in the episode. People watching it and thinking, wait a minute, because I don't think people think of swimming dinosaurs really, and they kind of explain it and say how the science leads them in this direction. Does that make sense? It's a really cool little featurette. So Hank is swimming along with his babies, but the ocean is fraught with danger. You can just about see here, it's actually not named in terms of the species quite yet, but it's just introduced as a mosasaur. And it also mentions how most of the babies do not survive, really. Like, I think it's like 75% or whatever it was, don't make it past the first year. Hank's original clutch of, say, 15 or so babies is down to 4 or 5 already. I think it's down to 5 at this point. One of them's hiding a little bit further at the back. Unfortunately, it's a nature documentary, babies are gonna die. It's just kind of part and parcel of this sort of show, and this will not be the first, it must be said. Before this, there's some beautiful shots. We see an Archelon swimming down below and stuff like that. But this is the first time where the show really kicks into high gear. The tension starts to go up. The music, by the way, the music for the entire show, I think it's Hans Zimmer, is absolutely beautiful. And the tension it generates here is really good. First of all, it's really interesting seeing the Rex swim, but then it's also seeing Hank as this very clearly protective parental figure. The babies are trying to stay close to him because even in the water where the mosasaur is dominant, Hank is able, just through sheer size and mass of being this ginormous predator, is able to protect himself and the babies if they stay close. And there's a scene in particular where Hank is swimming along and he ducks his head, and you'll have seen it in the teasers and the trailers, it's on the poster and everything, where he ducks his head underwater. What he's doing there is scouting out the mosasaur. He's watching it to see where it is. He's trying to protect himself and he's trying to protect his kids, and seeing that kind of protective behaviour is just, yeah, it's really cool. And there's going to be a lot of stuff like that throughout the episode. We'll talk about that as we get there. But a lot of tension, really good score, and eventually, obviously, we lose the baby, unfortunately, and it's played in a really nice underhanded way where the baby just kind of goes ploop. It kind of wiggles a little bit and then goes under the water. It's not like made to be some brutal thing, but it's kind of somber. And actually, interestingly enough, somber is quite a consistent tone throughout the show so far. There's a lot of elation, but there's a lot of somber moments, a lot of moments that are played for slightly depressively more than anything else. It's really effective. And Hank gets onto land. The other babies get onto land. They're dripping wet. They're just about made it. And Hank looks back across the ocean because obviously he's realizing he's missing a kid, and you feel this kind of like they're not trying to oversell it. There's not a tear dripping down, and it's not over characterized in a way that modern films would be, for example. But you do feel this slight sense of emotion and this slight sense of loss permeating through Hank as he gazes out upon this ocean, knowing that his child has disappeared beneath those waves. It's very, very effective. Very, very. And this is like 5 minutes into the program, and it's very, very emotionally affecting, it must be said. I really felt for Hank. But then the show's going to mix it up in just a moment. So I just want to give a shout out here to the baby T-Rexes. Every episode I'm going to try to mention what my favourite segment is and what my favourite creature is in the show. And I will say, looking at my notes, it's close if this is my favourite section, but I think this is my favourite section. And I think the baby T-Rex specifically is my favourite animal in the entire show. In the first episode, COASTS, by the way, first episode, I should have mentioned that. It just looks fantastic. I think the smaller dinosaurs, and especially the more heavily feathered dinosaurs, even though it's more like a furry covering, like a downy covering at this point in time, they come out really, really well in the show, more than anything else, because I think you can just render the fur/feathers in that kind of more... It's easier to do realistically than a full-scaled dinosaur, I'm assuming. And basically, they've come across... because there is a dead Archelon washed up on the shore. Or it was chilling on the shore and got killed, whatever. The dead Archelon on the shore, so Hank has brought his kids along so they can eat. But unfortunately, the Archelon is body down, right? The shell is here, the delicious suppleness is here. And this is a really fantastic scene. First of all, I think Hank looks phenomenal. This is where he looks his best. Interestingly enough, because usually it's the close-ups you think would be the best. But here with Hank, seeing the full body like this, you really get the sense of this like power and majesty in the dinosaur. But Hank has to turn the Archelon over, like so. He has to flip it up, so he kind of digs his snout under it and then sort of heaves, and you feel it's actually beautifully well animated. The babies are hopping around all super curious and wondering what's going on, and Hank is like using the musculature, especially in those big hind legs, to try and the thick neck and head to kind of flip the Archelon over, and you really do get a good sense of the force and weight being required to move this big old turtle. And Hank begins to eat the turtle. The kids aren't allowed to eat the turtle quite yet. They'll eat the turtle later on, but the kids are here to also learn how to hunt for themselves. And this leads to one of my favourite shots. My favourite shot in the entire first episode. There's a shot where you see the baby Rex, and it's kind of looking towards the screen, and it starts to move to the side. You're like, well, that looks really unnatural, because it's kind of just going like that. It's not like it's walking side to side. It's just kind of going... And then, oh god. It's one of the best things about the show. It feels like a modern nature documentary in that there's tension and there's beautiful moments and there's somber moments, but there's also humour. Animals are funny. They do funny things every now and again. And the fact that they can invent those funny things for themselves is even better. They can give that control. Instead of just waiting, you're recording... I've forgotten every animal. You're recording a baby elephant. Baby elephants are funny. But you're recording it, and maybe it doesn't do anything for 47 hours or something, and then on the 48th hour it does something funny. Because you need that. You need those moments of levity. And considering we just lost one of the babies, it actually makes it even more painful in a way, because these are the babies having fun and joking around and just playing and doing stupid things, and we know that we just lost one beneath the waves through a mosasaur a moment ago. But the baby's riding on the back of the Archelon as it pulls itself down the beach, and I genuinely laughed out loud, which, yeah, that was really good. Anyway, so babies are playing around and they're hunting. They're wonderfully well animated. They look fantastic. You really feel so much personality from them. They feel like playful little creatures, and they're here learning how to hunt the little baby turtles. But then it's time to move on from Hank and North America, and we're swinging over to Africa, and I believe to Morocco. This is Techy Draco, which is a pterosaur, basically, at the time. And you see these zoomed out shots. There's this gigantic colony. Just you can see them all there in the background. There's tons of different species here. I think it's 7 different species of pterosaur in the area. But I just wanted to show this Techy Draco here. There's the quality. It's incredible. They kind of like brush up against the uncanny valley fairly constantly because they look so remarkable, but they're not real. You can always tell. I mean, they're not real, but it's kind of on the verge of being real. But it's dead, and it's a very because it's been filmed like a proper nature documentary, it's a very weird sort of thing. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I think they're beautifully well made. I love the coloration. You can see little bursts of different creatures here in the background. We'll see more of those in just a second. I'm going to do the babies. The babies in particular, I think, brush up against the Uncanny Valley a little bit more, because we tend to see them more zoomed in, and the eyes in particular are slightly disconcerting. But they're here, they're having a good time, and again, it's cool because it feels very much like a modern seabird colony would. There's a lot of behaviours in the show which feel like if you were watching a modern nature documentary, you could apply it to other creatures and it would be legitimate, which makes sense. Really, there's only so many behaviours in the world, and at the end of the day, dinosaurs and other things would have picked up on similar behaviours to adapt to similar environments. So we've got this huge gaggle of seabirds, inverted commas, all these pterosaurs all squawking and crawling around, and the babies, they're really adorable how they walk. They've got these little tiny little stick-thin legs that they waddle around on. But they are not the only pterosaur on this coastline, because, boom, 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 this is Techy Draco. It's an adstarchid, and it feels like an adstarchid. As the others, as the Techy Dracos are kind of like walking around and birthing and doing all their things like this proper little bird group, the Techy Drake stalks in, and it just looks like it's like 2 times, 3 times the size of everything else, towers above everything else. It feels a little bit like a monster. I don't mean that in a, oh, it's a monstrous prehistoric creature kind of way, just it feels giant and imposing and ferocious, and like it could just eliminate anything it had in mind. It's very intimidating. It's really well done. But then we must move on. So we're there at the coastline at this big rocky beach, and we kind of swoop a little bit across the ocean. We're in the same area. It's in very much the same area, and there's these big rocky cliffs, and it's saying that some pterosaurs prefer to nest out on these cliffs because, you know, there's less predators. There's no, these adstarchids are not stalking around in that area, and that's where we get our Alcyone from. Alcyone? Can't actually remember. I'm going to go for Alcyone, but I don't remember. So the Alcyones are being birthed. They're popping up out of all this seaweed. Again, just look at the framing where it's down here at the bottom. Just makes it look tiny, but again, plays up that humor aspect a little bit. There's one thing Prehistoric Planet does really well, is just play with tone. It flits between funny and some. I've mentioned all that already. I'm very impressed. And basically the Alcyones, the little hatchlings, they're all popping up at the same time, crawling their way to the top of the cliff, kind of scrambling up, kind of how you see baby penguins do, basically. And there's this beautiful shot where we get to the top of the cliff, and they're all there at the top, gathered, basically preparing for flight. There's a forest nearby, just above where we just saw the Techy Draco, etc. And the Alcyones want to get into that forest because that's where they're going to grow up, that's where they're going to feed, that's where they're going to live. Anyway, we get another scene absolutely loaded with personality. They're all very hesitant, you know, they haven't learned how to fly quite yet. Their bodies can't quite set at learning how to fly at this point in time, and they're all sort of scuttling towards the edge of the cliff, ready to get that updraft and soar themselves over to the mist forests. So they're going over the water, and then there's the coast, and then there's the forest, and the forest is up high above the coast. So they need to stay up as well. They can't like swoop down to the bottom, because then they land on the coast, and we've seen what's on the coast. So they're all preparing for the flight, and again, they're all bouncing around in really funny ways. There's loads of personality to their movements. It's wonderfully well animated. And they take off on their flight. It's a nice, beautiful moment. This shot in particular I adore. It just has this kind of paleo art feel to me, partially because, you know, just how the skies are, this beautiful skybox we've got going on, the shape of the clouds, the lighting, and how they're all sort of silhouetted against the sunset. Feels like paleo art, and this is where the pterosaurs look their best. They all look fantastic in this moment. They really do feel like they could just be real creatures, essentially, in the modern day. And but unfortunately for the babies, there are Barbaridactylus swooping in. You know, this is feeding time, essentially. All these babies flitting awkwardly through the air. So we follow several of them. Some of them get picked out of the air. Some of them crash down, as you'll see, I think. Well, I just want to show you the Barbaridactylus again there. It's got one in its mouth. It's a good looking Barbaridactylus. Like I said, the pterosaurs, this lighting is perfect for them. You know, it just renders them really nicely. Some of them end up on the coast, and it's kind of like, you know, if there's a gun in a play, the gun must go off by the end of the final act. And if there's a Techy Draco in a nature documentary, by the end of the nature documentary, it's got to eat someone. It's the law. Unfortunately, so some of them swoop down a little bit too far and they crash land on the beach. It's this really awkward, kind of adorable crash landing, and then this guy just wanders around and snatches him right up. But it doesn't sort of shy away from that brutality at all. And some of them made it, and this guy, he's kind of the one that we follow along, again, stringing together a little bit more narrative and personality. He kind of like stumbles onto this branch, and he just kind of looks around going, rah, rah, and he looks so pleased with himself. I was so happy for the little guy. He's so chirpy and happy that he's made it into this forest, and they'll now spend the next sort of 5 years of their life living here, eating, getting large enough to go join the adults out there hunting on the open waters. And it's even a beautiful shot there where it shows the adults sort of flying past. It's kind of like a vision of their future, moving past the outskirts of the forest, kind of showing these Alcyonians what they're going to be doing down the line. And then we move along to the sunken continent of New Zealandia. And we have our Tuarangisaurus. Tuarangisaurus? Yeah, Tuarangisaurus. So it's a mother and her 6-month-old calf. And this is kind of where I would say the only slightly ropey CGI, I've mentioned this in the past, but the slightly ropey CGI comes in. Whenever they breach, do I have an image? Yeah, we'll go for this one. Whenever they breach the surface, it gets a little bit finicky. It's mainly, like, they themselves look okay, although it looks a bit weird, I would say here. It's just this area usually. This one's actually okay. This one's okay, actually, I would say. But on quite a lot of them, this sort of area here, where the body and the water connect, it can look a little bit iffy, and the marine creatures propping themselves up above the ocean line is the only time I kind of think the CGI kind of pulled me out of it a little bit. And that's not like a big criticism or anything. I'm just trying to be slightly level-headed here. Water effects, especially above water effects, you know, waves and split splash, is one of the hardest and most expensive things to render in terms of CGI. So, but this is really, so the Tuarangisaurus and her calf have come over to the shore after spending time out in the oceans, and the males are here doing this really interesting mating display where they do this. Basically, they prop their heads and their necks right up out of the water, just kind of. It's a little bit phallic, if we're honest. Maybe that's kind of the point, but it's just like, and like, just, you know, look how long my neck is. I guess people are into that. Nice long neck and how pointy I can make my head. And where am I? Yeah, so that's their courtship display. But the mother, she's not interested in that. She's not here for sex. She's here for rocks, aren't we all? Anyways, what they're actually here for, what the mother and the baby are here for, is pebbles. Which again is another really interesting idea in terms of their behaviour. So because this coastline here has a gigantic waterfall, it's worn down these rocks into these smooth round pebbles, and they are just swallowing them down, much like a cow would, basically. Now a cow does it because they act as like a gizzard stone, right? It helps digest food by breaking it down in the stomach. And they're doing it for the same reason, but they're also doing it to act as ballast, basically to help them balance themselves within the ocean, within the water. So it's a really fascinating behaviour. It's a really interesting idea that this is something they would potentially do. And again, we get a little bit more personality. The little kid here, the 6-month-old youngling for the Tuarangisaurus, is kind of like struggling to pick up the pebbles. It's not quite managing it. I'd say the kids learning things, basically. I don't know how else to say that. The younglings, the hatchlings, adapting their behaviour to the parents, or just kind of like learning how the world works and stuff. It's quite a big theme of this first episode, that we had the T-Rex babies, we had the Alcyone babies, now we've got the Tuarangisaurus babies. There's a lot of babies just kind of learning things, which is a phenomenal source of humour and cuteness, if nothing else. And this little guy is very adorable, just desperately trying to learn how to swallow these stones, of which they're going to swallow many, many stones in this little journey. But then we get another one of my absolute favourite shots in the entire... favourite sequences. This is really one that this screenshot does not do it justice. You need to hear it, you need to see it in action. And basically, the Tuarangisaurus is quite funny. She leaves her kid eating stone. She goes off to get laid, basically, unironically, and leaves her kid in the corner eating pebbles. Mother of the year, right here. I joke, but it was kind of funny just thinking about that if you apply it to humans, for example. Anyway, so Mum goes off to get some. She finds the male with the pointiest head and the longest, sticky uppest neck. And I joke, but this scene is beautiful. It feels like a fantasy film in a way. I don't know what it is, but the music is stunning. It's my favourite music piece in the entire episode. It's really, really nice. And the two Tuarangusauruses are kind of swirling around each other in the water, kind of like dancing almost. It's like this underwater pirouetting ballet dance, and it's honestly it's a beautiful moment. Anyways, we move on from that. We're still at the coastline, still underwater. I believe we're still in New Zealandia at this point in time. But we're here because of one very specific creature. This is Mosasaurus hoffmanni specifically. And it's chilling. So there's this area of coral where there's no coral. There's an area of rock where there's no coral. I'm like, okay, so, and they kind of build it up a little bit. It's a mystery, you know, what's going to be here. And this is my favorite. Every scene's my favorite scene. This is my other favorite scene. There's 3. This is my third. But basically the music ratchets up again. Again, the music, Zimmer's done a phenomenal job. Some of his best work in years. The music ratchets up and we see all these little baby, not little baby fish. We see all these little fish. I can't remember what they're called. I did write it down, but I swear I probably butchered it. Pycnodox or something like that. There's no way that's right, but anyways. And you see it, and it's focusing on this little fish here, this one on the right hand side. And he's swimming around and we get some close-up shots and everything like that. And you see the Mosasaurus. It's kind of like with the shot with Rex earlier on with the Mosasaur. And you see the Mosasaurus just slinking up behind it, mouth opening, ready to... And the music building up, and the music's tense and it's exciting and exhilarating and it's all building up to this dramatic, jaw-clenching moment. And then the Mosasaurus stops, and it sits here on the rock with its mouth wide open. And it's because these little fish, they come and they clean it. And you'll see, again, I think the fusion of CGI and real world here is fantastic. To the point that I don't think this is CGI at all. I think what they literally did was build, because the Mosasaurus needs its skin cleaned off, right? It's loose skin, as you can see here. I think what they must have done is build like an actual model. It doesn't have to be a full Mosasaurus, of course, but like a sheet of skin. And they've made a fish food that looks like skin. Or they've made something edible that looks like this Mosasaurus skin. And then they've got these fish and these shrimp, etc. feeding on it. Because I don't think these are CGI. And that suggests that the backdrop isn't CGI as well. So I think that's a really interesting idea. That I feel like that's what's happened here. I don't know for sure, but I feel like that's what's happened. But the subversion of expectations here with the Mosasaurus is really fascinating because we've already had that moment earlier. We've already built these Mosasaurs up as these gigantic predators of the ocean, the kings of the ocean, essentially. This was the largest predator in the ocean at that time. This is, you know, towards the end of the Cretaceous, in the Maastrichtian. And, you know, in the very first scene of the entire documentary, we see the Mosasaurus slink up in a very, very similar way and snatch that baby. It's killed this adorable little baby T-Rex. So we already kind of feel the Mosasaurus in a way. It's built up as this ferocious predator. And then here, it builds up in the same way, the same tense music, and then it stops, and it's a real nice subversion of what you expect. And I think a lot of that has been a very purposeful choice to have both in there, because by doing this, we kind of see the other side of what's... I mean, you could frame another scene with like a Triceratops or something and have the T-Rex hunting it, and you could frame the T-Rex as this ferocious, terrifying predator stalking it, chasing it, devouring it. And we're going to see stuff like that in the Forests episode as far as I know. So I think it's really important to kind of show both sides of all these animals. You know, at the end of the day, they're not playthings. They're not here for our entertainment in a way, or they never were. They have to hunt, they have to kill, they have to do things that we might find like, no, don't kill the baby. But also everything else around that, they're not black and white. There's kind of like how herbivores in shows always get portrayed like super calm and friendly, and it's been really nice to see a lot of shows recently, even the likes of Camp Cretaceous, have shown herbivores as more aggressive, defensive, angry, grr, whatever. The same kind of has to be done with the carnivores as well. We need to see them as playful and joyful and weird and funny and all this, but we also need to see them as carnivores, as hunters. And this was just a really nice play on that whole thing. I know I've gone on about it a lot, but it's a great moment. And that's why I'm hoping everyone's watched this before they watch this video, because I wouldn't want to ruin that moment. But then our Mosasaurus gets attacked. A young buck, a young male comes in and looks, you know what? Literally, that spot, that rock, my rock, it's a nice rock. I would like the rock. And I don't want to say this is my favourite scene, but it's up there. What did I write here? The attack is sudden and brutal. Yeah, so the Mosa's kind of resting there, just sort of chilling, and it's breathing every now and again and just kind of having a nice time. And then, bam, the younger male comes in out of absolute nowhere. It's a very sudden, brutal attack, and they're fighting, and the fight is phenomenal. It's so well done. It's kind of this beautifully choreographed underwater battle, and it's vicious as well. The Mosasaurus is twisting its flipper and it's biting down on it, and there's like a body slam moment, and it feels like a proper choreographed fight in like a film, you know, in a modern film where two people are beating each other up in some ways. It feels like a proper fight with like a little story behind it. You know, one will be winning at one point and the other will come in, and Attenborough's talking over the top of it about how Mosasaurus these fights could be lethal. And there's a particular moment where our Mosasaur, the one that we've got an attachment to because we've just been watching it being adorable, and they do actually manage to make the Mosasaurus cute. It's funny. Sort of dives up into the dives above the water, takes a deep breath, and then swings back down and clamps. Oh, it's very dramatic and very cool. It's really, really well done, beautifully well animated. Nearly then now, folks. Yeah, that's it, taking the breath. Again, just look at that. Again, it always looks a little bit ropey above the water. This was one of the better scenes for it, but the stormy seas and this... Again, it always feels like, if not paleo art, then just art in general, you know. There's so much care and time taken for the general framing of the show, which is super important. Anyways, nearly done. We move back to North America, and there's all these bioluminescent ammonites. I can't really show you this because you need to see it for yourself, and hopefully you have to really feel how amazing it is. There's hundreds of them, all these bioluminescent glowing ammonites rising up from the seabed to breed at the top of the ocean, basically. And they're not just glowing, but they're like pulsing with light, and it goes on about how the male and the female, they kind of like go, it's kind of like Avatar, and they kind of like sync up like this, right? And apparently, what the male has to do, so the female, her light's going zoom, 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 pulsing along her, and the male has to time his own bioluminescent pulsing, his glowing, in time with hers, so the light kind of goes zoom, like all the way across both of them, and he pulls it off. They mate successfully. It's like a sexy version of Parappa the Rapper. It's mad. It's really interesting, unique behavior, and seeing them use light like that to communicate and for her to judge him on his ability to match her rhythm in terms of the light display, I thought was a really fascinating behavior. And again, it's nice to see something outside of the large reptiles, you know, it's nice to see mollusks doing their thing. And then they all die. Ironically, they just all die because they're cephalopods, and although... Do you guys say cephalopod or cephalopod out of curiosity? I've always said cephalopod, but Attenborough says cephalopod, so I'm curious. Maybe I've been wrong my entire life. Anyways, they all die. There's really depressing shots of all these... The lights are out and they all wash up on the beach, and it's like, no, we've just seen this magnificent display, this gorgeous light show. Again, with all the haunting, beautiful music, and then they just wash up dead and empty. And it's the show just playing with your emotions and playing with the tone. Really interesting. We get a lovely little Walking with Dinosaurs reference, because of course we do. And then we're back with the Tuarangisaurus. It's not explicitly mentioned, and it's one thing I think the show could have done a little bit better in this first episode, is string together a narrative about particular creatures in the way that, again, a modern nature documentary would. I think this is meant to be the same Tuarangisaurus, but I actually don't know that for sure. I think I'm like 99% sure it is, but it would have been interesting to hear that mentioned, that's all. Just say, the Tuarangisaurus from earlier has now ventured back into the ocean, whatever, something like that. And she's swimming along with, again, her calf, a 6-month-old, and they've got various other Tuarangusauruses with them, and they get attacked by a mosasaur called Kaikaifilu, and it attacks. And it's a really nice moment. So the mother is pregnant, which again, she got pregnant during the whole sexy dance earlier, and the Kaikaifilu attacks, and obviously the mother can barely move, she's weak, she's carrying a ginormous baby, you know, she's doing her thing, she's, you know, her mobility is definitely reduced, she's low in energy. So her calf, her 6-month-old, maybe a little bit older by this point, calf, goes and attacks the Kaikaifilu, as we can see here, just swings at it, and it's kind of nipping around and diving around, and you start to fear that. So the calf is basically trying to sacrifice itself to keep its mother alive, to let her escape the Kaikaifilu. Unfortunately, he survives. Swimming around, diving around, and then all the other Tuarangusauruses come in. It's a really nice, like, big family moment where the entire shoal, whatever you want to call it, is sort of bands together to protect the mother from this. And again, it's showing those alternate behaviours, those family behaviours that I think are often left behind in this kind of documentary. Well, prehistoric animal documentaries, to say the least. It's just a really nice moment. And then another beautiful moment is the baby gets born. Just kind of plops out, and it's this, I don't know, it looks like paleo art, and there's no mention of it being albino or anything like that. I know some people speculated that it was. I suggested that what it was more just because it's a newborn, and newborns often have very different coloration. They often have lighter coloration or darker coloration or stronger colours or weaker colours or whatever, but it's often quite different from the adults, and I think that's all that's going on here. It's just a lighter coloration than the grown-ups. or even the 6-month-old. So you'd expect this one to darken over the coming months, basically. But it kind of like comes out and it's all folded in on itself, and it kind of unwraps and lifts its head and sees for the first time. And there's this beautiful shot of them going up to the surface, and it's, you know, it's got to breathe air for the very first time from above the water, and you can see here resting its head on top of its mother's neck. And it kind of just, it's nice to end on a happy note for one, you know, and the 6-month-old survived as it distracted this mosasaur, and the whole family comes in to attack the mosasaur and to scare it away from the mother, who then successfully gives birth to an adorable baby who is indeed adorable. And it's just a really nice way to end the episode. It was a fantastic episode. I don't really want to give like a number review to the whole thing. It's very hard for me to do that. Yeah, I really liked it. So yeah, my favorite creature in the whole thing, baby T-Rex, so beautifully made, looks fantastic, animated fantastically, so much personality, and the scene of it riding on the Archelon was just legitimately laugh out loud funny. My favourite scene, other than the Archelon riding, it may have been that underwater mating dance that the Tyrannosaurus did. It was honestly a really beautiful moment. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, the mix of brutality and somber and beauty and everything is exactly what prehistoric life should be. Anyways, next episode is the deserts, so we're going to see those battling sauropods. Super curious about that. Looks brutal, that scene. Very excited about that. We're going to see some Adstarchids. We're going to see the Mononychus as well, which we obviously saw the other day. Really excited about that as well. That's it from me. I wasn't really sure what to do for this video in a way. I know I've just kind of told you what happened. I've tried to add commentary and talk about things. It's quite difficult in some ways. Also, I'm not a paleontologist. At the end of the day, I can't provide too much more. But you know, if you've got any criticisms or anything, if you've got anything you'd like to see me dig deeper into, you know, there's 4 episodes left. I'd like to do this every single day. So if you've got other things you think I should talk about more, other things you'd like to see me address, other ways to mix up these episodes, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I'm very much open to new ideas for this. But that's about it from me for now. Thank you so much for joining me. Go check out Prehistoric Planet on Apple TV+. Throw me a like if you enjoyed the video. I'll see you lovely folks tomorrow. Cheers, much love, and as always, bye-bye.
Houston, if you're ready, we'll maneuver. Reaching out.